So now we are going to listen to a presentation on global dairy trends, drivers and outlook. And a very warm welcome to the Managing Director of IFCN AG, Dr. Torsten Hemme. You have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I need to understand who is sitting here. Whom of you defines himself as a dairy consumer? Please raise your hands. Who has consumed the dairy products in the last 12 months? Ice cream, yogurt, whole milk chocolate. Okay. Thank you for being a part of the global dairy world. Whom of you would define himself more as a part of a processing company? Please raise your hand. Okay. Who would define himself more as a person who is providing inputs for processing companies? Technology companies. Okay. Okay, very good. Are there any farmers here in the room? No farmers in the room. So we could focus on processors and technology companies. Thank you very much for participation. The global dairy trends and drivers. Everything, the pulse of the dairy world is the milk price. This chart is showing the world market price of milk taken out of the value of dairy commodities. Whole milk powder, skim milk powder, butter, cheese and whey. And we calculate everything in a way that we can connect it to a value in US dollar per 100 kg milk as a farm gate milk price. So this price we publish once a month on our website. And right now you see we have a tremendous volatility. Plus minus 50% around the mean for the output price. This is a little challenge. Overall, the average was quite okay, 38 US dollars. So if your boss asks you, what is the world market price of milk? You could say, in average, in the past, it was 38 US dollar. But plus minus 50% depending on what cycle we are in. I've structured the presentation in 5 parts. I would like first to illustrate you how we work in IFCN. Then I talk about the milk price in detail and the drivers, the farms and the farm economics, and our outlook. My colleague Mustafa is giving you a kind of a world dairy map. And if you are listen carefully, and if you could explain these charts to your colleagues, you are immediately perceived as a global dairy expert. This is this map defined. And you just need to talk 2 minutes about it and people will perceive saying, oh, this guy has a global overview. So, the IFCN is a global network with the mission to create a better understanding of the dairy world. And we do that by comparable data, and out of that we generate knowledge, and then you start with new ideas. The network has 3 components. It's a network of researchers from over 100 countries providing information. There's a network of companies, and there's a team in Kiel doing it all together. And these people meet in different events. Because when I started this IFCN, I thought at the beginning I only need data. But with data, I only have half of the story because I need the people. And if I bring together structured data and people, really knowledge is generating in a very powerful way. The network right now, the researchers network shown here, we are capturing now around 110 countries and capture 98% of world milk production. And on this side, it was for me as a researcher very interesting that more and more companies have approached us and saying, Torsten, what you are doing there is interesting. And I said, why is that interesting? You are a processor. Yes, Torsten, if I produce a dairy product, 80% of a cost to produce a dairy product is to buy the milk. So I need to better know that one. Saying, oh, that's fine. And then a farm input company like Klaas or John Deere come to me saying, hey, you produce tractors. What do you want from me? He said, yeah, the dairy farmer is our customer. And we want to know where the dairy farmer is in 10 years because then we could serve him better. Saying, You are all working in the dairy chain, you have similar questions, why don't we form a team and learn from each other? So that's how this team of companies has been built. Now let's move into step 2 of the milk prices. This was a milk price chart I have shown you. It looks a little wild, but there are very precise patterns in it. It is pretty easy. Long-term average $38 in that time frame. That's what we know. Then we had around 5 different cycles. The research work on dairy cycles is not as good as, for example, the pig cycle. The pig cycle has been much better, the pig price cycle has been much better analyzed. The dairy cycle is new. You see, the first cycle started in 2007 and it lasted 3 years. That was phase number 2. And we call that a roller coaster cycle because we first have 50% higher and 50% lower price. Then we had a certain phase of stabilization over here, and that was our phase 2, which we call a zigzag. Usually a zigzag phase is following a roller coaster, especially once you have in the dairy crisis built up so much stocks that you could buffer the market for a certain time. And then another cycle starts. So the phase 3, which we call a dynamic wave, the supply or demand shock was not that strong, so you have a 2-year cycle, but a lower amplitude. And the cycle length and height depends on the volume of the shock. Imagine you have a glass of water and you throw in a small stone. How big are the waves? Small. If you have a small glass of water and you throw in a big stone. So the shock is important, and the shock could come from the supply side or from the demand side, and both is possible. So this was a dynamic wave. Then we had a 4th phase, and the 4th phase was another roller coaster, and this time it was 4 years, not 3 years. Normally, such a roller coaster ride is 3 years because this has to do with the biology of the cow. 9 months pregnancy, a little bit more than 2 years raising the cattle until the cow is ready, and that is a 3 years length of a cycle. Here, in that case, it was longer because the European Union has abolished their milk quota system. We have flooded more supply, and the crisis was a little longer. So, and what happens after a dairy crisis? We had another zigzag level, and we are still somehow in a zigzag mode. And you can be all prepared. At the end of the presentation, I would tell you there will be a new cycle to start very soon. So what is basically the main driver for this prices? It's supply and demand. So what is supply and demand? Have a look on this chart. Supply, the dark green bullets, is supply of dairy products in milk equivalent on the world market. The bigger the volume, the more the net export milk, which, for example, California has to export. California is producing more milk, so they need to export, and Florida is only focusing on the fresh milk market, and in Florida is the importer. And that happens in every country and every parts of the world. So, when green bullets getting bigger or red bullets getting smaller, prices are going down. If green bullets getting smaller or red bullets getting bigger for whatever, prices go up. As simple as such. For example, if you have in Korea a foot-and-mouth disease like some years ago, bubble gets bigger, because they need import more milk, and prices go up in Germany, in Brazil, in US, if in Korea they have a foot-and-mouth disease. The world is very much connected on that one. So the main message on this chart is watch the developments in the regions, and then you could estimate what really happens. Another key driver of the whole dairy world is demand. And this driver is something what we are really and most concerned of. On average, a person in this world is consuming around 110 liters of milk in different dairy products. We in Europe consume 3 times of that. So each of us, we consume almost a liter of milk per day in form of butter, of cheese, whole milk chocolate, ice cream, etc., etc. And to be honest, 100 grams of cheese is already a liter of milk. Yeah, it's so easy. But you have also countries like Indonesia with 13 liters or China with 30 liters. The growth of the dairy industry depends on the trust and the income of people in the red zones to grow their per capita demand and to grow the overall demand of dairy products in the world. And what you could see on this chart, will the demand growth in the future happen in Europe? United States? No. It's all in emerging market countries. The next 10 years of a dairy world will be the market for the emerging markets in overall. Now, another chart here is we have been analyzing who are the largest, the top 20 milk processors in the world, and we have ranked them by milk processing intake. So in our number 1, in terms of milk collection and handling, is DFA in America. Number 2 is Fonterra. Number 3 is Lactalis. And you could go down the list. But what's very important to look in the future, the top 20 companies are just processing 25% of the milk. And these companies are already very big. But this is not a consolidated market like the car industry, the computer industry, so there's tremendous scope of structural change in the future in this segment. And this list will look in 10 years substantially different. Dairy farming and dairy economics. Let's start with the Rotterdam Declaration. Whom of you have heard about the Rotterdam Declaration of the dairy industry? Okay. So it was a declaration of the dairy industry and FAO that we need to do something on sustainability on that planet. And one element of this story was the dairy sector is supporting the livelihood of 1 billion people on this planet. The livelihood, the living conditions of 1 billion people depends on the fact that milk is produced, transported, processed and retailed. Why? There are a lot of people working on farms, their family members, a lot of people working in the chain. We have been working on these metrics for quite some years. And you know, in a lot of countries we don't even know how many farms are there. We are not really sure how much milk is actually there. So we have been working on these numbers, and I would like to guide you through the numbers and the mathematics. We probably have around 120, 130 million dairy farms on this planet right now. If we assume 5 people per household, we have around 600 million people living on dairy farms. Quite a bit. Then we have we estimate around 70 million jobs in the supply chain, upstream, downstream. If you calculated that with the people, 5 people per family, you are another 350 million. And then you have some, what people call induced or spin-off jobs. So more people living in rural areas, you need more teachers, more supermarkets, more banks, etc., etc. This is all in there. So whenever someone tells you that dairy is bad for the environment, have you heard this argument? Who has heard this argument? Dairy is killing the planet. Yeah? Tell him, we can take out dairy, but then we need to find another solution of 1 billion people on this planet and their livelihood. Right? We can do that, it's no problem, but what is then the solution? And I tell you something, dairy has a tremendous power to fight poverty in rural areas in emerging market countries. It's a fantastic tool to improve livelihoods of people. Do we have still time? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Do you have still energy on this one? Good. So, since 15 years we are monitoring cost of production on farms. Why is this so important? If I want to produce 1 kg of cheese, 80% of the costs is to buy the milk. And I like to mention again BARTEC, who has kindly invited me. The second biggest single cost component is to transport the milk from the farm to the processor. So, with Lutz's presentation and my presentation, you cover right now the biggest cost elements in the dairy chain. So it's good to monitor them. And if you look on this chart, if costs are low, it means that these regions much more likely gain market shares, and if costs are too high, for example like in China, it's much better to import dairy product than produce it locally. So how does it look like right now? Let's start with the green zones. The green zones are the low-cost regions. South Africa, parts of Latin America, parts of Mexico, Eastern Europe, parts of Turkey. And I tell you, in most cases, these are very small farms, very extensive production systems. 2 cows, 5-liter milk yield per cow, very low feed cost. This is sometimes the magic of these systems. Then you have countries in the gray zone. If you are in the gray zone, you are somehow between 30 and 40 US dollar. And if you remember, that was somehow the cost level of the world market of milk. If you are there, you are safe. Whenever your costs are in the red zone, you need to consider ways to get better. Let's say it like that. Okay, now let's have a look on the perspectives. Now I need your help. Who is more interested in the long-term 10-year perspectives and who is more interested in the short-term perspective? So, who is more interested in the long-term perspective? Raise your hands. 10 years. Okay. Who is more interested in the short-term perspective? Okay, good. 10 more minutes. But the people might have questions. So, okay, let's start with the long-term perspective. We have been collecting, validating data in the dairy world for 20 years. And since 5 years, we have now a system that if we close our data collection, we start a process in January. Okay, now let's think about what is the future. We produce in the next 2 weeks, we finish our 10-year outlook. Then we present them at the different conferences. And then we have closed the learning cycle. In some areas, we have been good. Some areas, people tell us, you're stupid. Does it happen that your boss tells you that you have a potential to improve? Does it happen? Yeah. Sometimes our customers are not that nice with us. They sometimes tell us the truth, saying you're stupid. Saying okay, yes, okay. So we have been doing this learning curve for more than 10 years, and I like to share you with one key slide about the dairy world. It starts with how was the dairy world in 2006? How was it in 2016? And what does it now look like in 2026, in 10 years? And here you have then the absolute growth, the total percentage growth, and the annual growth rate. So, what is the metrics? The metrics, if you start on the bottom, milk production and demand, the green slide is the most important one. We probably will grow milk production by 26%. 220 million tons. 2.5 times the current US milk volume. That's what we probably need in the next 10 years. And that is similar, if you look from 2006 to 2016, we have been adding that milk additionally on this planet. So, 26%. Let's have a look at the supply drivers. You can produce this with cows and with milk yield. We think that we will grow our milk yield, but we still grow our cow numbers because that is a trend of the past. More milk could come from more cows or cows with higher yield. In Europe, in developed market, we always see that cow numbers are stable or go down and milk yield goes up. On global scale, it's not the case. In India, in Pakistan, in Africa, milk yield is growing because we are adding more cows with low yields on the market. This is very critical for the environmental footprint of the industry because a farm with very low yield is not sustainable. One thing, let's have a look on trade. We think that their global dairy trade will grow by 60%. So it will move from right now 50 million tons. This is probably almost twice the milk volume of Germany, and we will add another 30 million tons. So a lot of milk will be produced where it is cheap and will be exported in countries where it is not that easy to produce. Nevertheless, a lot of milk will be produced locally. Now let's have a look on the key demand drivers. Why do we have 26% more milk demand? And the most easy indicator to predict is how many more people we will have on this planet. Almost 1 billion. And population estimations are pretty precise, unless we have a really bad situation. But 12% of the growth comes by just having more people. And another 12% comes that the average per capita consumption moves from 115 to 130. Of course, that this type of chart looks for every country pretty different, but I think it's for you important to know, as long as consumer trust in dairy, as long as young people think dairy is a good thing, nutrition-wise and socially responsible-wise, we will grow milk demand, and that is a tremendous boost for the future of your industry. And those people who are sitting here are processors or processor equipment providers. I could tell you 2.3% more milk produced, but the share of milk collected by dairies will grow probably significantly faster. So you are in an industry where the compound annual growth rate of milk collection and processing might be between 3 and 5% per year. So you are in a growing market if we have enough trust for the industry. Now let's have a look on short term, because there were some people interested in that. What drives the dairy market short term? It's a cycle, right? We have a change in world market price, then it takes a little while, and then we have a change of farmers' prices in a specific country. Then the dairy farm economics change, and then the farmer adjusts, produce more or less. Then we have more or less milk, and then the milk price will change. That's the logic. And if you ask yourself, why is dairy so volatile? Why do we have cycles? It's very simple. We have a price signal, and 8 months later we have a supply response. And the longer that time is, the more you are in a cycle world. If supply could react immediately on a price signal, we would be in a much different world. So, to illustrate you a little bit what price transmission means, how fast do countries' milk prices, here blue, move to developments of world milk prices. The red line in the United States, you see in general, the blue line is following the red line, sometimes not. Especially 2015 and 16. Prices in the world market were very low, and the American farmers were really good on prices. In Germany it looks completely different. We have taken the complete low here. Here was really a dairy crisis combined with a global dairy crisis in Germany. The US market was not there, but overall they follow the market. Right now it's a little bit different. For a specific reason, European farmers get a much higher price than the world market, and experts of you know that's about the butterfat market in the industry. So, now how to predict short-term future. We believe in facts and data, and the more we have data in real time about milk supply, the better we can predict the market. Usually, and this is for example this chart you see, is the growth of milk supply of 60 countries. Historic data in green, and the last 3 months we always estimate, so that we know now in March how fast milk supply is growing. You see on average, milk supply growth is somehow between around 2.5%. If that is the case, the pace of supply-demand growth is parallel, and we are in a balanced market. Then you have times where milk supply growth is substantially below the long-term average. This is usually either the result of bad milk prices or a climate shock. And we had 3 of them in the last 10 years. And then you had times where milk supply is tremendously higher than normal, driven by good farm economics before or climate issues. So, right now, we have been growing, 1 year ago, we have been growing extremely low and have been reactivated a lot of supply growth in the last 12 months. Right now, milk supply is growing probably in line with milk demand, and there has been a new tendency coming up the last 4 weeks that we had climate shocks in a number of regions, Oceania, Latin America, and parts of Europe. That has taken out a lot of supply, and that is very healthy for the sector at the current time. Another way on looking into the future is always to look and saying what is the forecast, what currently the future markets do. So what we have done, for example, on the blue line here, we have taken the CME future markets for butter and skim milk powder, and we calculated how much could a processor pay a farmer if he sells that on the US market, and then you get the price forecast for US. And right now, the price forecast, and then we did the same for New Zealand and EU. So right now, the short-term price forecast of EU and US around 36 US dollar, with the current exchange rate a little bit more than 30 euros. And with our supply growth, we would say we are in line with that one. In the US market, things are not that nice. Any one of you are being active in US market? Little? Okay, the US market is now running into a crisis. There have been an oversupply. The fat demand growth is over, and it's a current situation there. Good. To close my presentation, I have 4 main messages for you. Milk prices are volatile, and they will be volatile in the future. Number 2, the social footprint of the dairy industry is the biggest of all agriculture products. 1 billion people on this world depend on producing and consuming milk. Be careful if you want to take that away. The third one, the dairy growth story, especially driven by growing demand, is likely to continue if people keep the trust in the product. And milk prices, a new cycle will start. Not too soon, but once the shortage of supply is over, we believe more that we start with a downturn than an upturn. Thank you very much.